today we have joined here for 8th Landscape Express series. So before we start with the presentation, I would like to introduce the guest speaker for this session. We have with us architect Khushboo Taneja. She did her bachelor's in architecture from MBS School of Planning and Architecture, IP University, Delhi, and completed her master's degree in landscape from SPA Bhopal in 2020. Currently, she is working with Oasis Design, New Delhi, and she worked on a landscape project of 500-acre township in Ludhiana, and now working on 6-kilometer long streetscaping project for PWD in Delhi, and also working on landscape design development for an upcoming mall in the prime heritage area of Chandni Chowk in New Delhi. So today she will be presenting her thesis on the topic landscape reclamation of flyash wasteland, a case of Badarpur Thermal Power Plant, Delhi. And without further ado, I invite architect Khushboo Taneja to present her thesis. Over to you, Khushboo.
Thanks, Tushalika, for the introduction. I'll start. Okay. So, am I audible? Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So, like you said, the topic is landscape reclamation of flyash wasteland. The site is located in Delhi. To start with, I would like to tell everybody what a flyash wasteland is. So, there was this thermal power plant in Delhi, Badarpur Thermal Power Plant. It got shut down in 2018. So, when these power plants are it was a coal-based power plant. So, when they burn coal and everything, so the residue which comes out is fly ash. Okay, I'm sure in architecture a lot of us must have studied what fly ash is and how we are using it these days in architecture. We are making bricks and everything, but how does it get made? What is the source at which this material is being produced? So when Badarpur Thermal Power Plant was shut down, there was a huge chunk of land, approximately 895 acres, in which these guys were dumping all the fly ash. So what they call is a ash pond. So they make a pond and they dump ash on it. So all of this land, once this was shut down, so all of this land was a defunct land now, and something about, and it was obviously in a very bad state. So that was my vision to what extent and how we can figure out this mystery of reusing that land again through landscape interventions. Of course, there are a lot of other ways to do it, but my focus was on landscape interventions. So in a place like Delhi, where everything is so tightly packed, and there is a very the lack of land, there's no land, and obviously the property rates are very high and everything. So a site as huge as this was like a prey that was being hunted down by hunters, and my concern was that it should get developed in the most holistic way possible, at least try for it. So this was a huge land again, and getting it in Delhi, so obviously again developing it into a recreational area, which can be used instead of making a high-rise building on it. So we can, using landscape interventions, make it something recreational, which obviously people can use. So the main idea was to convert these brown field into a green field, and obviously all of this is a very insensitive, human interventions. So what this land had a lot of potential, so it can be reclaimed as an integrated open space. This was the premise, all of the story. Now I start. So this is a quick look and onto how an ash pond looks
Khushboo,
like.
sorry to interrupt you, but your slides are not changing.
No, I just changed it. I
Okay.
hope it changed now.
No, no, no.
It hasn't changed.
No.
What slide can you see?
First one.
Ah, okay. Alright, I'll just reconnect them.
Okay.
Can you see it change?
Yeah, now it's changing.
Alright, so this was the first slide which I was speaking on to the premise, and now I want to show you guys how an ash pond looks like. So this is how the site looks like. It was all grey. So grey is the major color here. Everything was grey. All of this ash was all across this land. There were a few grasses growing here and there, which were obviously wild ones. But so the intensity of the fly ash here was that it ranged from 3 meters. I'm talking about subsurface levels. 3 meters below the ground level to 25 meters. It went that deep into the ground. So there was no soil. Imagine, there was no soil. It was all fly ash. So my aim was to reclaim the fly ash wasteland and develop it into a public recreational area. The first objective was to understand and analyze the quality and properties of fly ash. So obviously, when you are dealing with fly ash, you need to know what you're dealing with. So the process was through literature studies and interviews and site visits. So I understood how the fly ash is produced, how it is utilized. So this is all very theoretical. So I would just like to say that there are two ways in which the ash is dumped. It is either through wet disposal or dry disposal. So wet disposal में slurry बनती है, that is disposed into a pond, and dry disposal में the dry ash is made into a mound. So that is known as ash mound. So on my site, it was wet disposal, and it was dumped. There was a huge pond made, and the slurry was dumped, and eventually the water will evaporate, and whatever will left is the slurry, the ash. Alright, so the next thing that I studied was how the ash affected our natural resources. So it obviously affects the air, it affects the water, and it affects the soil. So it can obviously when it's affecting the air through wind transport, and it's affecting the water through surface runoffs, and when it has reached the surface water, it filtrates into the groundwater, and then when it has reached the surface soil, it leaches down to the deep soil beds. Next thing is how dangerous is coal ash. Like, what are we dealing with? So it has very less percentage of radioactive elements as well. There's arsenic, there's mercury, there's lead and chromium, and we all know how dangerous these metals can be to our health. So basically, this was to understand what kind of a material we are dealing with. I studied the physical, chemical, and microbial properties of fly ash. And how did these properties affect our limitation? What affected our growth of plants? So if I am on a site which is full of fly ash, can I or can I not grow plants? and if I can, then how? That was the mystery that was to be solved. So, for example, if I'm talking about chemical properties and high pH, so this has a high pH and this leads to deficiency. So if the material has high pH, so that leads to deficiencies of nitrogen in the soil, and we know how much that is important for the growth of plants and all of this other theories. So yeah, so I also tried to study that what happens when a ash pond is it destroys itself and it comes in contact with its surroundings. So there was this incident in Kingston in 2008 where was this coal ash spill happened. So when we are containing ash in a pond, so we are making dikes around it. By dikes I mean DYKES. So these are structures in which which are made. I'll show you a section. And this is stored. So when in this case the dike broke off, so all the slurry which was there in the pond, it all went out to spread all across the context. So that kind of led into a lot of loss of life and natural resources, and it was not a good thing to see. Similar thing happened in MP in 2020. So hence ash production, environmental concerns and properties को study करके I understood fly ash. Moving on to the site, just let me know if you want me to skip anything or if I'm speaking too much. Just let me know.
Okay.
So the site was located alongside Yamuna. So that is also a big factor as to how important it is, that how it is affecting the context. So river Yamuna, whatever bad shape it is in Delhi, but still it is a very important natural resource to Delhi and the states around it. So it was located in the floodplains of Yamuna. This is the site here, and it is this close to river Yamuna. Site chronology was approximately before this pristine land was touched. There were water bodies on it. There were lakes. So obviously these guys got a banaya already made lake. So they started dumping everything in that lake. So it started from there in 1975. And then into 2018 it shut down. So all of these years of exploitation on the land, and look what we have got. So this was the site context. Like I said, it is very close to river Yamuna, and the site is 895 acres, and it lies, it is sandwiched between these very two important natural resources in Delhi, which is the bird sanctuary and a wildlife sanctuary. Somewhat. So basically on an upper level, on a canopy level maybe, or through bird corridors, these sites are connected. So yeah, so it is also connected by arterials road, and around it we have the land uses that it's residential here on this side, and on this side it is residential, and again on this side there is a canal that is going right beside it. And on this side there are agricultural fields. This is the site. These major big double lines that you're seeing now, these are the dikes that I was talking about. So we have 5 ash ponds here. 1, ash pond 2, ash pond 3, 4, 5, and all of these are surrounded by dikes. So this is how a dike looks. This is how the cross section of a dike is. So when I'm walking on the site, I am not able to go here inside an ash pond because it's deep down. So I'm walking here along the ash dike. Sorry, on the ash dike. Next is site analysis. I studied the relief, slope, hydrology, vegetation of the site. Jo bhi tha, jaisa bhi tha, however it was. So which gave me into a synthesis map. So what I saw was that through the dikes there were some steep slopes with dense vegetation. So around here we have a very dense patch of existing striped kind of a forest. It's a very dense foresty land, which obviously was there before, but then these guys must have cut off and started Then there was steep slope which had stunted vegetation. So there were some grasses which were already growing here, in very bad shape. So the browns you see are stunted vegetation. So everything was there along the dikes, on the slope of the dikes. Everything was growing. So there were some waterlogged areas which were observed, and there was obviously exposed ash all around. The most contaminated areas, if you can see, there is this red dotted line. These red dotted lines are the most contaminated areas, by which I mean that up to subsurface level, up to 50 meters, the ash is below the ground. And then the least contaminated area is the yellow one here, this one. This guy is least contaminated up to 6.5. And so on. So there was this again another area where the dike stabilization is required along these dikes which had no vegetation, and the steep slopes were exposed. Then we had one highest point which was a potential vantage point, plus 219 meters, and the lowest point on the site was plus 199 meters. So there was a 20-meter difference along the slope of the site. Next, okay, so this is one very interesting thing that I came across when I visited the site, was that NTPC, the agency that runs this whole thermal power plant, these guys had already had an eco park plant there. So जब मैं गई थी तो already इस पे काम चल रहा था. So I was told by my faculties that you can critically analyze it and see what good they are doing and what bad they are doing, and then you can carry on. So by critically appraisal, there was no good thing about this proposal. They had a very weird kind of spread on the site, and they were just using it for cafeterias, and even when there is no construction allowed here. So the bad part here is how they were treating fly ash. So what these guys did was they just they just dug a pit, and they put all of these manure, neem cake, bone meal, vermicompost, and all of these layers onto it, and they planted a tree. That was there. That is the most they could do. So इससे क्या होगा कि what will happen in the future is that, okay, fine, you have planted a tree. By the time trees roots are here, it can spread well, it can grow well and everything. But once the tree roots starts to spread across this, then the tree will start to get its effect. That how fly ash will affect it in the long run. So obviously these guys look for short-term solutions, but it was not a long-term solution. So, okay, next is the objective 2, which was to recommend mitigation measures for degradation caused by fly ash infiltration and to restore the ecological value of the land. So I did a few case studies which were again brownfield sites, and how did these guys reclaim it. I did not get a case study which was exactly related to fly ash like this, but whatever close to I could get. So I studied how they handled the other industrial waste, how these two guys, Menemini and Shanghai, they handled other industrial waste, and what are the fly ash techniques, this was a live case study in NTPC ka ek or another site which they guys have reclaimed an ash mound, and how they've grown plants on it. And then the other was for post-industrial landscape, how does the design go around it. So yeah, so these are the major takeaways. Next, going on to objective 3, this was the main objective which I found was the revegetation approach. Okay, so initially what we had to do was to plant grasses. So we start with planting grasses. Now those kind of grasses which which support the mechanism of phytostabilization and lysodegradation. So if these mechanisms are supported by the grasses, then they can help us in reducing the mobility of pollutants, and by breaking down the microbes which are present in the grass can break down the carbon sources which are present in the fly ash. So grasses which support this mechanism was important to start our planting palette on the side. Next approach is to then we go on to shrubs, what kind of shrubs we plant which support phytovolatilization and phytometabolism. So here plants take up the nutrients and whatever contaminates, they take up the nutrients through their roots and they convert it into better microbes, and then they basically reduce the contaminants, and then through phytovolatilization they use it and then they release it into the environment. So this is how we do shrubs, and then we have a little stable soil, then we start to plant trees. First we plant small trees, then medium, then large. So other here mechanism involved are phytohydraulic and phytodegradation and phytoextractions. So plants actually have the capability to break down these elements and make it into something better. So this was how I was envisioning to further go. So this is a small snippet of how the site looks like. So there was a tow drain, these are the fly ash dikes, and this was the fly ash wastelands, and these were the waterlogged areas which are deep down. So within 0 to 3 years, we plant grasses on the slope of the ash dikes. Then these are the waterline areas. We do grasses all across actually. We do grasses all across. We want to stabilize these beds first. Then within 3 to 15 years, we want to, when the slope of the dikes are stable enough, we want to start planting shrubs and trees, and so on within 15 to 10 years. This is how the major 3 steps were there, and it's basically a matter of time when we do it and how we do it, when we see the site is ready to take up more. Next is to develop a public space concept exclusive to the site character to retain its industrial past while cultivating activities. So moving on to the landscape development program, this was the most interesting part which I found, because the process is really long. So it was the landscape here was there has to be a template as to how we want to develop. So it has to be done in phases. Obviously, like I told you, it takes a lot of time and years. So it has to be done in phases, and it has to be envisioned right at the start. So there's gonna be DP phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I had to make 4 CLDPs as to what development program is gonna be at phase 1 and to phase 4. Starting with phase 1, which is 0 to 3 years. So the remediation process here is given a head start. The aim is to create an achievable but compelling first phase of development in the first few years to generate enthusiasm and commitment on part of the stakeholders. Ki hanji, something interesting is happening here and we want to be a part of it. So what we do is we start by giving protective buffers, because we don't want fly ash to fly around these areas and affect the people living around it. So we give protective buffers around the site like this, so that fly ash cannot go around. Then we start by contour bunding, stabilize the slopes. We give something to engage the community, and then we make a permeable edge. We start all this. Then also we can make jahan pe we have some stable slopes, there we can start by giving small trees or large trees at the foot of the slope, so it doesn't slide off and everything. So the first phase, this part is developed. Here we give community engagement spaces, we give some central land art element, then we give some edge stabilization. All of this is happening side by side. Next we move on to phase 2, which is approximately 2 to 10 years. Everything is overlapped here. So here we move on to the other parts of the site. So here we want to we have started giving more activities. We have given the remediation process is gaining pace, 1 year at a time. The engaging activities for passive and active social groups is extended to comfort user with different surprise elements. अब यहाँ पे what we have done is, अभी तक in the previous we had left all of this around. We have I'm at phase 1 only. We had left all of this exposed and we were only working on this area, and we had given buffers around it to protect whatever is happening here. Then and we start by planting grasses on this brown patches that you see. We start by giving grasses here, and we start a little amount of activity in the front part. We give an interactive fringe. By interactive fringe, I mean how do we want to welcome people to our site. Next, now this area, we are envisioning that this area has started to develop. Now at these brown patches, I started to give shrubs, and the rest of the site I started to plant grasses on the rest of the site. So this is how we move. There was this one interesting element that we gave was a sludge meadow. By sludge meadow, which is here. So what we are doing is, there's some part of site that I thought that we should retain. Why? To keep it as a post-industrial memory. Like, it should be grey and people should be able to see how it would be like a viewing point for people, as to they can see how, with years this grey is turning into green. Moving on to phase 3, which is 10 to 30 years. By this time, almost all social and ecological activities have been staged, and subsurface ecological processes are still working at their steady pace. So now these pieces of land in my usable land is now ready to be turned into a woodland, and this is like a piece of pilot project. Like this is how these are the things which are working fast, and you can see that we are able to grow trees here, and the rest of the site we are now planting with shrubs. So now the establishment of tree cover has started. The tree has started to take roots, and we also start to give a little water bodies here so that people can come and interact with water. Next would be the phase 4, which is 30 to 50 years, and definitely it will go beyond 50. So here we have now our whole site is ready to plant trees. So we turn into a huge woodland kind of a place, and we envision to see enhancement of habitat growth here. Now we are ready to connect the bird corridor between the two sanctuaries. There has to be a woodland establishment. Now we have activated the whole site in a way, and we can complete the road network, and we obviously integrate the remediation history. Moving on to the site, the design. My concept was, the design concept was to mend the broken loop. So like we know that ecological succession here is an infinite loop. So this loop was broken due to the anthropogenic activities. What I intend to do is to mend the loop. So that we are mending through revegetation strategies. The other elements of the concept would be to create memory, post-industrial memory, to maybe give some artful wastegate, like using flyash only to make some land art. Then obviously remediate ecologies, which we talked about. Then there has to be some social cultural features. Then economic benefits, because we are obviously again selling fly ash from here. We are making park infrastructure out of it. We can think of interesting ways to use fly ash, and how are we using it in our design. We can make elements out of fly ash, obviously landscape elements. We can make seaters. We can make vertical elements, like pergolas and everything. So paver blocks and so on. This was the zoning which I showed you earlier. So here we have an existing, so this part obviously I was designing. Out of 895 I took 80 acres, and this is what we did a detailed design on. This is the existing woodland. There is an interactive fringe which will include shopping spaces, pedestrian plaza, culinary spaces, and maybe space for forums. Then community composting terraces somewhere here. There's going to be a conservatory. There's going to be walk-in exhibition spaces. There's going to be industrial archaeological park, passive recreations. We are going to have space for events. There's going to be active recreation as well, artificial mounds which are made out of fly ash landfilling. There's going to be a spiral mound. The highest point I envisioned it as a spiral mound where you can go up and get a better view. Then there's an open air laboratory and sports complex we can give, and there were services and obviously soap civilization. The design evolution happened through three major points, which were post-industrial memory. There were the social synergies were envisioned, and obviously there were restoration remedies. So I tried to carve out a story out of like when we are moving from, this was the entrance, like when we are moving from here to here, what kind of a story we are able to, see. So what I thought that when we're entering, one should be able to see what kind of a place they're standing on, what has been the journey of fly ash. They should be able to see it through sculptures. Then there was a fly ash dump sculpted by design like this. The land art will be the central element. So this is also made out of fly ash. They should be able to know where they're standing. And then what if we had, this was the place which I said I'll leave as it is. So what if we had not done all of this, what this place would have been like. We won't do any remediation here. Let it be. Let it grow on its own. So, and again, like then after that we go right on top and see what the view that we are imagining. So these were the nodes where we overlook onto the site, where we realize that what we have done. Then we relax amongst the land art. Then we go and observe. Then we go on to the vantage. Then we have a transition node. We have node for rest and reflect. We have a node to interact. This was the design master plan. There was an interactive fringe, industrial memorial gallery, viewing deck, sludge meadow, elevated walkways, treatment gardens. Yes, I used to call these treatment gardens. Sorry, I forgot. Where we started to plant grasses and everything. So these whole chunk treatment gardens. So there is a contoured bunding, there's filtration pond, there's picnic grounds, there are terraces, open air theaters, and a lot of other things. These were the sections, some of the sections and views. These are the snippets out of how we are imagining some parts of the site. Treatment garden and how the initial phase will look like and how the final phase is supposed to look. Growth of plants and everything, trees. Yeah, that's all from my side. No, that's all.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. So the platform is now open for queries. Please.
Can I ask something though?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, who all do we have here?
Mostly we are first year students.
Acha. Okay, you are the first year student. What semester? First semester?
Second.
Second semester. Okay. So, acha. I thought I had in mind that you guys, you guys would have to select your thesis topics already.
No.
Okay, so
it will happen in next year.
Acha. So, what is this chat series like? What was the idea behind it?
To get to know about the thesis that seniors present, how they work on it, and what kind of layers they work on.
Yeah. So we were also given this exercise in our first semester, where we studied and presented. Actually, here we are presenting that there we studied their thesis and we presented it. So that was one exercise. You must know about it.
Okay.
All right. So
please ask if you have any questions.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am. Firstly, thank you for the presentation. That was very informative. I would like to ask the ash font which you have used. It, the images which I saw here, it shows like the pond is kind of dry. So I just want to know what if the pond is having water, or what just in case flooding happened there for some reason like extra rainfall. What should be done in that case?
No, obviously, like I showed you the cases where the dike collapsed and there was flooding already. There has been some places where flooding has already happened. So it is a very dangerous case. You imagine there is a very tight residential area around it.
No, no, no,
Very
no,
tight. So
no, that's not what I meant. I want to say that in your like the pond you are referring is kind of dry. What if it's having water? What in that case? The design approach should be.
see, though, because it's a very huge land and there is no shade on it, eventually the water is meant to dry. So the slurry that we are pouring in the ponds, that is वो इसीलिए it is put in wet form so that it doesn't fly away. But eventually it dries, it evaporates and it dries off. That is the final stage for ash. It is mixed with water for a reason, and then it is dumped as to get dried only. So there is no wet form of ash. The final form of ash is dry ash.
Okay. So I mean, when it is in the wet form, like in the case of active industry, then can we use this method?
Use what?
I mean, like phytoremedication. Can it be used?
I don't think so, because first of all, we are not allowed in normal general public is not allowed in lands as dangerous as these. But all of this cannot be done. The plantation technique, the mechanisms involved that I was referring to, all of this cannot be done. It should not be done basically on dry ash. It would make no sense, because that is again not the, like I said, not the final form of ash. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I have a question about the sludge mode that you described. So, I want to know how like what measures you would suggest to keep it visual and not physically in practice, because that would again be dangerous, right?
So what I did was I made an elevated walkway around it. So I imagined an elevated walkway around it, because we are not to go in near that place, and because it has a lot of respiratory problems also. So we don't walk. We only walk around it on an elevated platform. So that's how I envisioned it. So that is one place that is untouched, and we walk around it, get a view, and move on.
It was a nice presentation, and I was actually hoping to see more of your slides to do with the natural layers, hydrology, and all of that.
What slides you wanted to see?
The natural layers, hydrology, and others, and how what influence you got from me.
Acha. So I did all of that, but this was not a normal site. So it was a very different site to deal with. The contours, in fact, all the contours I had was just the dikes. So there was not a lot to feed on those guys, because there was nothing to feed on those natural layers, because the information that was available was, I did not even had a survey. So I had to extract it to GIS and everything. So it was not a normal everyday site. So I think the more important things that I showed you, those were more important and more feeding for you guys.
We are actually currently working on industrial landscapes.
Okay.
Working on post-industrial landscape and two of them are working on active industries.
That's great. Where are your sites?
My site is in Kollam. It's actually based on a heritage textile industry. That's only a small part of our entire site that we've delineated. Then we have some mangroves and all. So we are doing a combination of an eco-sensitive zone plus industrial heritage.
Okay, that is very interesting. I was enjoying it.
Yeah, but it seems like a new topic and there's so much like for example, I asked you the national areas because currently we are in that stage. We are doing site analysis, and like kind of get a handle on that right now.
If you want, then I can show you those slides. Not an issue. I can like zoom into and show it to you.
If you have the time and don't mind.
Yeah. Okay. Till then, if anybody else has any query, then we can. So tell me one thing, are you guys working from home or what? Like, you guys in the campus?
Yeah, actually we are, so far we are not been to campus. The institution has called us for campus next month, which is only like one semester before, 1 month before the exams.
Okay. Okay. So next year you will be in.
Yeah.
Who are your faculties? Who's teaching?
The channel is coordinating the studio. Other than that, we have Sonal ma'am and Anupama ma'am also.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just quickly try to explain. This is the relief map. Here, what elevations we have on the site, and what are the vantage points. So, this was the elevation map. Is the screen visible?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the dikes around which there was movement.
Sorry, Priyanka. We can only see the kind of presentation slide, not this what do you call that? Not just the regular slide. I can't see where your cursor is.
Can you not see a zoomed in relief map?
No, we are seeing a PPT file, not the slideshow.
Can you now see?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was the relief map. Here we had the topmost points were these dikes on which there was movement. There was dike all around the site, and these areas were not accessible. Okay. So here the vantage points were through this I figured out the vantage points. What are the lowest points and highest points, and what introvert views and what extrovert views do we get? Like if I'm here on the highest point, this dike is a high point, and here we can get an introvert view which is inside the site, and if I'm standing here on this dike, then I'm getting an extrovert view which is outside the site. So these were then the lowest points and the highest points were. Then moving on to the slope analysis map. Here the only steep slopes were around these slopes, and rest everything was very gradually. Because the name explains it, it's a pond. So jahan pe on the edges it's very steep, and we, like I told you, we go as deep as 6 meters to 25 meters. So the lowest points vary as per that. And the percentage of slope was the highest here. So it was the lowest here around the dikes. and then it was very gradual all across the pond. The most contours you can see now here, it's all concentrated here. So this was the main profile. Then I studied the hydrology. In hydrology, my main concern was what was the waterlogged areas, which gave away the fact that if it was waterlogged, then this was also the lowest point on site. So the water obviously flowed from the steep slopes towards the lower slope, and also at points went out of the site, and there was a 100-year flood line, there was a 25-year flood line which was related to river Yamuna. And yeah, the flow direction we showed the flood lines, we showed the waterlogged areas which were the lowest areas. So this is what the hydrology map gave. So these, if it was the lowest area, then it was supposed to be treated like one. It is not supposed to be filled up. And so when we were making lowest area, that would mean a potential water body can come up here, because it is already a depression. So that can give away the fact that we can provide water bodies at this point, and we need not dig up another area. So this was the hydrology map, and the last one was the vegetation. Vegetation around the site was very interesting, agricultural lands and everything, but within the site, the white areas you see is all ash. The brown areas you see is ash mixed with brown grasses. A little bit of tall grasses were there. Then there were also Prosopis juriflora, which is a very dangerous tree to grow, and then there was dense vegetation around the site. So there was my major legends were ash exposed areas, green, the mounds, and I can't figure it out. Green, most green, and I think brown areas. That was the vegetation legend. Yeah. So all of this was major selling point for the for my case were the slopes, with the steep slopes which were around the dikes. That was what most important. That was one of the very important aspects to deal with.
Okay. So, like, for example, your vegetation mapping, what were the inferences you drew from that?
Inferences I drew was if I have a green area, see this. So this related with the fact with my ash depth. Suppose this area here is a little green. Why? If it's green, then it has to be less contaminated, because I can see some green grasses here. And if there is no trace of green, like I said, this was the most contaminated area, जो मेरे synthesis में भी निकल के आया, because it was all ash. So this all boils down to ash, because it's a fly ash wasteland. So if it's so it varies as per the contamination. I also studied the grasses that were there. I don't remember the names, but that also were helpful, because those are the grasses that are surviving there. And if it's a grass and it's surviving there, then obviously it can be joined together or clubbed together with the plant species that I'm going to propose, and these two can help each other into further, because if you know that plants form a network beneath the ground. So network through their roots beneath the ground. So if these grasses are surviving on the site, then these can also help the growth of other grasses around it. So I also made a conservatory in my design, and that can help us to study all of these permutations and combinations. So we can actually create an educational facility out of it to to give away our learnings. See how are we, using what grass with what, and how are we intending to tree fly ash through this. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Hi, I am having one more doubt and one more question. Uh, the plan you have proposed, there would be water logging like within next 1 2 years. So there could be like possibility of aggregates coming there, and the pollutant there can be get inside their like food chain. It could
So
be.
yeah, so I'll tell you, this was also a major concern. A lot of famous agriculturists and scientists have studied this site. So there is this person called Professor C.R. Babu. So when this site got derelict, when it was not used, so a lot of people, like I said, were hunting down this place. So Mr. C.R. Babu is also a socialist, and he has a lot of knowledge regarding all of this natural resources study. So he was the one who, there were a lot of newspaper articles also. So he was the one who pointed out ki okay fine, the government is allowing to develop this site through an eco park or whatever, but no fruit trees should be grown here. That is because the yield that will come out of the fruit trees will be dangerous to intake. So it was not allowed to grow fruit trees here. So there was very less there was very less chances that it could enter into our food chain. So even I did not propose any fruiting trees here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Anybody having any other questions to ask? If not, then we can conclude this presentation. Thank you, Khushboo, for this amazing presentation, and it has been an informative session for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was nice to know few of you, and all the very best. And when we had so you guys have, yeah, okay. So when we had the chance to meet our super senior, and when we were in Bhopal, it was a very fun session. So, but the times, we are in a very tough times right now, but it would have been nice to know you guys personally, because we had the chance to know our seniors, and in some way or the other, we build a network when we meet and greet people, and so it would have been nice. But I would like to tell you all, if there is anything you want to ask or reach out in any way, so you can, because we belong to the same SPA family, so we can have a conversation whenever you guys want. So this is the least we can do as seniors.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.